Hi, I'm Colleen Brennan.
And I'm Janice Rodriguez.
And this is Defending Indiana. In this episode, we are celebrating Hoosier women and learning how to harness our power with special guest and podcast favorite, Christina Hale. Hey, Janice.
Hey, Colleen.
So today, I guess we're talking about women in Indiana, notable women. We're not going to hit all of them because obviously, starting with Colleen Brennan and Janice.
Hello. I mean, this is just the episode of just on ourselves. Michigan City's finest, baby.
It's super notable. Oh my God.
You're like, excuse me, Long Beach. Get it.
No. I take Michigan.
You take Michigan City too? Okay.
Absolutely.
I love it.
No, so we're going to talk about notable women from Indiana. We're not going to be able to hit everybody, but let's talk about a few of our favorites because I feel like people don't realize that notable people come from places other than New York and California.
Like they were usually born somewhere else. Then they made their way to glamorous Hollywood. Sham. See, I was going to bring it back to the
sham. We're in Manhattan now.
Yeah, they're like, where they? I was born in a small town. That was really Mellencamp. I'm sorry, but
small town from Indiana.
Then exactly, I made it to the big. I took a train. I don't know. How did you travel back then? The horseman. I'm going way too far.
I mean, there are some notable people from the past like 20 years. So
right, you don't have to go.
I don't think they're still
going like
horses.
1700s.
I mean, you could if you really. If you're an equine lover.
I love it. Exactly. Why do we always do that? We like jump from we just jump decades constantly. I love it.
I think we're timeless. I think that's
what it is.
Really.
But no, I do love that story though. I love the story of it was that time with MGM, and going from talkies to film,
they were hopping on a horse and
where you're
out west.
Literally, you would get off the train or the bus, and you would knock on Meyer's door and be like, "I'm ready to be a star," And it's just there's these crazy stories like that. So I think when you look at people from Indiana, from that time period, that's literally what they did. I don't think they were scouting in Indiana. You know what I mean?
And maybe they should be.
They should. Thank you. This is what I'm saying. Because there's a lot in the last 20, 30 years that I'm like, oh, I didn't know they were from here. I didn't know they were from here. So
right.
Yeah.
Look, imagine what our lives would have been like, Janice, if we had been scouted.
You didn't come to the St. John Bosco 7th grade talent show? What? You didn't see the vision? Did you not see the future? That was
I don't know why they didn't find me at the Market High School Godspell production from 1984. I was freaking brilliant.
Transcendent, if you will.
I transformed.
Please tell me you have that on an old VHS tape.
No, I think I've got a yearbook photo of me holding. I don't even know.
Somebody has a grainy.
It's very grainy,
shaky camcorder. There was always that one family that had one back then because they were so expensive. Remember?
Yeah, I mean they were like
20,000.
They were like Hollywood cameras where you had to bring a reel with you and pop it on, and
you need a rigger to help you because it was. There's a generation of dads that have messed up shoulders from holding.
Right.
No, we weren't one of those. I don't have any video of my childhood. This is going all over the place. Do you have a lot of video? Did you guys do the millimeter?
We had.
I feel like you guys would do the millimeter one with the no sound.
Oh God.
8 millimeter.
You. Yeah. And black and white because they didn't.
None of them that. I didn't see that. You added that. No, but I just I'm who wants to watch these? There's no sound. It's just click, click, click of the.
We had no video of us. My parents were way into taking photos and then they turned them into slideshows, and we'd go. We had
sit around and watch them.
We had a movie projector or a film, or not a film, a screen. God, okay. I can't think. A screen that you'd pull down. It was built into the wall, and you'd pull it down, and you could project your slideshows. Kids, these are fireside chat times right here.
Wait, in the slides, or they make them on the computer?
No,
a carousel projector.
Yeah, as you're clicking through each slide. That's the sound that it would make.
My raspy voice today. I feel like you and I are bridging the technology. There's only like 10 years between us, but there's so much that happened. Like
in those 10 years. Oh my God. Think about the time distance between like my oldest son to my youngest son. They're only like 3.5 years apart. And I feel like there's a whole
there really is
world apart. It's crazy. Anyway, we were talking about women from Indiana.
We're going to do a segue here. There's something to do. Well, okay, that's good. Let's talk about actors. There's some famous actresses, female actors. They come from Indiana.
I'm gonna start because I'm old.
You're not old
than you. I'm gonna start with some of the silver screen legends.
I love it. And there's a lot of sham.
And I'm gonna start because why not?
Wait, why did they talk like that, dude? Did people really talk like that?
Sham?
No, but like that, everything's all breathy. Like every movie from like the 30s and 40s, everything was all, oh wow, didn't you call me? Sorry, that's very Glass Menagerie, but like
it really was.
It was real specific there.
Very. You have a gentleman caller.
I'm obsessed with Glass Menagerie.
Caller at the door. Your brother's bringing him home. Hide your menagerie of animals. We don't want that around.
But that was every other movie without the Southern accent. Everybody was breathing.
John, go out to the barn and find us. Yeah, I mean, like, I don't even think
they worked on a farm and they're talking like that.
John, with a feather boa.
Milk the cows. Why do they have a feather boa? What's going on?
This is way off the rails.
Totally. But okay, so you're gonna tell me some of these people. These are the golden era of Hollywood. If you
silver screen, baby. So, but okay. I have to start with one from Michigan City, my hometown. Ann Baxter was an actress from Michigan City, Indiana, in the final years of Hollywood's golden age. She was nominated for an Emmy and won both an Academy Award and a Golden Globe. And she was the granddaughter of Frank Lloyd Wright. And she was in All About Eve, which is like one of the most famous, like top 100 movies of all time. And great film. So anyway, Ann Baxter, she was a badass from Michigan City,
she
Indiana.
Looks familiar to me. Okay.
Big actress back then. And then Carol Lombard.
Also old school.
Really old school, super like epitome of glamour and like.
Oh yeah, I know her.
So she was an actress from Fort Wayne, Indiana, who was featured in some of the most successful film comedies in the 1930s. And she began her career in silent films and signed a 7-year contract with Paramount Pictures. Yeah.
She just got off the bus.
She just got off the bus from Indiana. From Indiana 4-H to Hollywood.
4-H, exactly, to Hollywood, baby.
And she was also married to Clark Gable until her untimely death. I don't know how she died, and I probably should know that, but I don't.
It's going to be tragic, dude. Either way.
Yeah. And
I thought he was like a confirmed bachelor. Or was that Rock Hudson?
Apparently not, because it says right here at visitindiana.com that she was... She was also married to fellow movie star Clark Gable until her untimely death. And then it just ends. I mean, I feel like that's a terrible place to end.
I know, right?
Shouldn't we know? I mean, when you say untimely death, like the reader immediately wants to know what caused that untimely death. But apparently, visitindiana.com didn't think it was necessary to include that one detail before they put in the link for learn more about Carol Lombard. I'm a little disappointed. I'm not going to lie.
You guys are going to have to do your own research on this.
Sorry. There's homework.
So I'm on Clark Gable's page. We're going way out here, but he was married like 5 times.
Well, so I mean, he had to replace an Indiana girl. That's all.
What it was. Well, Carol was like right in the middle.
Well, he needed some solace. I mean, once you've had an Indiana girl, you might need to try a few more just to make sure you're getting the same quality. I'm just saying. I'm putting it out there for Indiana.
I was going to say, because I remember, I'm like, he was like, a playboy. Well, she was young. She was born in 1908 in Fort Wayne and died in 1942. Exactly. They're not saying it.
What I love about her is that she was remembered primarily for her comedic skills.
Oh, she was in a plane crash.
Oh.
What? Lombard's career was cut short when she died at the age of 33 aboard TWA Flight 3, which crashed on Mount Potosi, Nevada, while returning from a war bond tour. I know, it's horrible. Today, she is remembered as one of the definitive actresses of the screwball comedy genre and American comedy, and as an icon of American cinema.
Yeah.
So she kind of came up the same time, I think, like Lucille Ball was.
I mean, maybe like in the system, but I think she was more established probably by the time.
Yeah, by then
Ball came about.
But that same screwball type.
Yeah.
I saw a whole thing about this where they kind of always put the woman as like, she's always tripping or spilling stuff on her. Like she had to go through a lot, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But it started that genre. And she was, Carol Lombard was like the queen of that.
Cool. All right, Janice, you picked.
I know that was depressing. Sorry, I'm like, poor thing.
We did. Okay. Oh, and Florence Henderson.
Oh yeah, you guys
did Brady. Mrs. Brady, Carol Brady from Indiana.
Born and raised. She gives me Indiana mom vibes.
She definitely does.
Even though she's living in California during the show.
Definitely. Yeah.
So, I always liked her. Shelley Long.
Oh, that's
from
right.
Cheers.
Diane, Fort Wayne.
So I always wonder if maybe because Woody, obviously we talked about this before in a previous episode, like Woody Harrelson's from Indiana too, right?
So he was Indiana adjacent because he actually, remember we said that he went to college with Mike Pence. They were both at like was it Hanover College?
Yeah, Hanover.
I think.
Yeah. Okay, but he wasn't born in Indiana?
Now we're gonna have to go back.
See, dang it. Well, the reason I say that is I think he was born in Ohio. Was Shelley like how much does Shelley? Because I think she was off the show by the time Woody came. I just don't know. Like, there just seems like there's a lot of Indiana influence in Cheers, and I was just curious to see if like Shelley Long contributed to that at all.
I don't know.
I have to like look at the timeline.
I don't know because I know that she came up through Second City,
right?
And do you remember that she was in the John M. Smith Homemakers commercials?
She was.
She was like this.
I know that jingle.
John, I'm not going to sing it again because.
No, you did it perfectly.
Thank you. But yeah, and then all of a sudden because I was really young when those were out. So you were probably not even born.
No, they still use it.
But she was like this, she was the spokesperson. And then the next thing you know, we saw her on Cheers and we were like, oh, that's a famous person because she was on a commercial. But I was like, I don't know, 11 or whatever.
That's a jump. I mean, good for her. That's a jump.
Gig, right?
Like a regional commercial to like huge. But I mean, I guess when they do these pilots, you never know if it's going to work. You never know if it's going to get picked up.
Yeah.
I mean, that show was just magic though. So
yeah, it was magic. And she was on at the same time as Woody Harrelson. They
overlapped. Yeah. There was overlap. And then I know she came back, a couple seasons and there was things. But Diane came back. Oh, that's curious. Cool. Let's try to get Shelley Long. Can you get her people on the phone?
I would love. Hey, by the way, anybody who's listening, I mean, aside from like
my mom,
Lombard and Ann Baxter, and Florence Henderson, who are all unfortunately deceased. If you know any of these people and would want them to be a guest on Defending Indiana, just hit them up and tell them we're going to come stalking.
Exactly. Just hit them up. Just get Shelley on the phone.
Hit them up. Also, Jane Pauley, who we've talked about before, who is one of my
Colleen's favorite personal hero.
I freaking love her. I would do anything to talk to Jane Pauley. I have adored Jane Pauley since I was a small child.
I mean, we all have our things.
We do. I just think she's remarkable.
No, she's cool.
Yeah.
I loved her. Yeah. I remember like the Today Show. It was when her and Brian Gumbel were on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I felt like she was cool and he was like always like I don't know. He just seemed like I'm so serious. Because I feel like she was like, but I feel like back then it was definitely like more hard news.
So maybe some more Jane Pauley.
Yeah. I liked it because she was calming. She had a calming, very not stoic isn't the right word, but
composed.
Composed. Still felt warm, but composed. Exactly. Thank you.
And she gave off this aura of trustworthiness. Like These are facts. I stick to facts. I'm not going to throw in my opinion. I am literally reporting what is going on, and I'm doing it in a responsible manner. Like that's Indiana right there.
For sure. And I imagine she's, old school in that fact. It's like three sources
Right.
on the record sources.
Right.
I mean, these people are going to print, they're going on camera, online, whatever, with like hunches and I kind of heard. And it's just, I'd love to talk to her about the changes in journalism and media. And like,
I know.
So I imagine she was like, I don't know if she retired or if she kind of got pushed out.
She does CBS Sunday mornings.
But there was a period she went dark in my mind, but maybe she was raising a family. I don't know what happened.
I don't know what happened when she went dark, but I love now that she's back.
Host.
Yeah. She's the
host. I love it.
Yeah.
That's okay. Who knows Jane Pauley? Somebody
please
know somebody who knows somebody.
Please hook us up with Jane Pauley.
I love it.
There's childhood.
A lot of good journalists and writers. Obviously, we had, we went through writers, and I mean, a lot of talent in Indiana. And I love like the old, like it's cool if you look back, like we were like doing all this research, all this. I'm exaggerating a little. It wasn't all this, but
that was an air quote.
I mean, she always comes up during Black History Month, and it should be Black History all the time. Okay.
Yeah.
But Madam C.J. Walker, I wanted to talk about her.
Amazing.
Because I keep saying it incorrectly. I kept saying she's the first Black millionaire. No. She was the first female millionaire in America.
Yeah.
And she was African American, and she was 1930s, smack dab in the middle of Jim Crow, and like made an empire. And I think this movie, there was a series, it's still on there, you could flicks, called Self-Made. And unfortunately came out right when the pandemic started. Octavia Spencer, Oscar winner, she plays her. Other great names, Tiffany Haddish is in it, Blair Underwood. Watch it. Obviously, it's like a little bit of a fictionalized version, but I've done research on her, and it seems pretty true to fact. But she like made a laboratory to kind of cater to Black women for hair products, and that was it. Kind of sold door to door. Like, I mean, just like the epitome of the American dream, the epitome of like the American entrepreneur, and I don't feel like she gets talked enough about, and she's from Indiana,
and not talked about enough for sure. But remarkably, if you go to any website and you just Google notable women from Indiana, she will always be the first, because she was such a pioneer and such an amazing human being in what she accomplished. I mean, she's super inspiring for women all over the country.
Absolutely. Yeah. And she, I think she was born and raised in St. Louis, but she moved to Indianapolis and really made her home there. So Indianapolis claims her. And yeah, it's a really cool story.
Yeah. Check her out. Who are some other women that we are highlighting today, Janice?
I'm like looking at like the historical women. What did you say? Remind me about Amelia Earhart. She wasn't from here, but at the time of her death, she was living here because she was doing some project with Purdue, right?
Yeah, she was a professor at Purdue. She was in aviation. So she was, anybody who doesn't know, Amelia Earhart was the first woman to fly across the Atlantic and the first woman to make a solo transatlantic flight and the first person to fly solo anywhere in the Pacific. She had a ton of other accomplishments, but she was on the faculty at Purdue for 2 years at the time of her death.
We're going to claim her. We don't know. We're claiming her.
Well,
that should be our thing. If you did anything cool and you spent at least 2 years in Indiana, we're claiming you.
Well, right. And the Purdue Research Foundation provided the funds for her flight around the world. And Purdue is funded by the state, and it's a state school. So I think we're taking her.
We're taking it. Yes. I think you've justified it perfectly.
She's ours. Vivian Carter. This was someone that you pointed out to me, which I thought was really cool.
Because I didn't know this story. She's I love that they said if things would have been different, she could have died a rich woman. Long story short, she was a DJ in Gary. Her husband owned a record store, and they could not kind of get their hands. This is pre-Motown. Yeah, could not get their hands on like the regional like Black music of the time, the R&B and blues, and so they started a company called VJ Records. And strangely, somehow after that, they signed the Beatles.
That's amazing.
And so they engineered the initial release of Please Please Me. And apparently it only sold a mere 5,600 some odd copies. And then their next release was From Me to You. And for whatever reason, they started playing it. It didn't draw any airtime at that time. Because, they would like re-release things, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So the label dropped the British band.
Oh my gosh. Who knew? But didn't they go on to do other things. Like
it says, unfortunately, that they went bankrupt in 1966.
Oh, well, okay. But they tried.
It's just one of those great music trivia things, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you know, it's kind of like the guy who left the band. Like, there was another drummer before Ringo.
Yeah.
It's like the guy who quit right before but that's in a lot of, you know, musical folklore of bands at that time. So there is there you go. There's your Indiana Beatles connection and region connections. There you go.
Well, I think what we want to highlight is the fact that there have been a lot of women, and we didn't even, I mean, there's your Janet Jacksons, your Vivica Foxes, your tons of authors. I am blanking on everything, but
professors, researchers, doctors. I mean, like amazing work. I mean, even like my friends, like I have friends who are, you know, journalists, on air personnel, like, I don't know, just a lot of talent. A lot of great things. And I know, again, people tend to bag on Indiana. I think it goes back to kind of those values we're brought up with, and hard work and a little bit of that humbleness. And I think those are like good characteristics to have. It, can get success in any industry you go into.
Yeah. Our guest today is a civic leader and former Indiana state legislator and the current best-selling author of Why Not You? A leadership guide for change makers of tomorrow. In 2021, she became a Biden-Harris appointee, and she's currently serving in the administration. Please welcome our special guest and friend of the podcast, Christina Hale.
Hey.
Yay! Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
We are so glad to hear you or have you here today. So I have to say that Christina is like instrumental in helping us like get through our first season. So everybody loves the Wait, That's a Law episode.
Mm-hmm. And good.
That was the first episode. Yeah.
It's a fan favorite. People go back. Thank you for that, and we're glad to have you back. If you haven't listened to that one, please go back. It's episode number 2. It's after our Hoosier episode. It's our first.
You're right. It's our first guest episode. You're right. Yeah. Episode 2, season 1.
I should get a producing credit for season 1.
You should.
I think I can do that.
No.
I feel like
it's up to you.
You were our talent coordinator, right? Wasn't she?
Yeah.
I feel she was connecting us. Yes.
Then I got kind of busy, and I'm sorry about that. But I have to say, this has been a tremendous hit with all the people I know, and there's just a lot of momentum behind this show. So thanks for having me.
Oh, we're so happy to have you here because today we want to feel good about Indiana. So
this is where I laugh uncomfortably.
We've had some uncomfortable moments over the past month or so. So we're going to see if we can get comfy for a little while, and we'll let in a little discomfort, but because that's what we're all about. But first of all, Christy, by the way, I'm sorry, I'm calling you Christy because I've known you for a very long time.
I prefer it, actually. So all my friends out there listening, please call me Christy.
Okay.
It's my,
I don't know your enemies. I tried to call you Christina, but
I had to interview for my first job in Indianapolis 7 times. And by the time, your formal name is on your resume. So by the time I started, I was like, oh, you can call me Christy. And they also, you're a Christina. You're not a Christy. I was like, really, I am. Just ask my brothers or my husband, or my mother.
Yeah.
Nope. So it's actually good to hear it.
All right.
So it's another time when somebody told you who you were as a woman. That's great. This is not starting off on a good point, Christy.
Well, okay.
We love it. We're allowing it.
That's okay. All right. Sorry. Let's pick it up, Colleen. I'm sorry. I'm bringing it down. Please. I know. I'm looking at everything through this negative lens. I need to be my mom right now and put on my rose-colored glasses and see the good.
Your mom, another one of my podcasts.
Oh, yes. She's a fan.
Hi. I love her because I know she's listening when my family isn't. But anyway, so Christy, tell me, let's give our listeners a little bit of your past history. Let's talk a little bit about you, how you got here. You can start at the beginning or wherever you want and bring us up to speed with where you are now.
Oh, the deal was I didn't have to talk too much about myself, I think, Colleen, but I grew up in Indiana with brothers and going to a small Catholic school. same one you did. And I think it is highly coincidental that it's also the K-12 the K through 8 of our Supreme Court Chief Justice, John Roberts, So
there's
certainly
another notable Hoosier. Yeah.
So yeah, certainly disparate forces at work there, at least people that have maybe different value sets. And certainly he's a man of accomplishment and tremendous power. But, I think there would be a lot of pushback today from many women in Indiana on some of the decisions he's been making. But yeah, so grew up in the Indiana Dunes with you and so many other good people we know. And it's a special part of Indiana, I think, because it's so diverse. But got knocked up, had a little son named Owen much sooner than I had ever anticipated becoming a parent, and just kind of worked really hard to graduate from college and build a career. And it kind of led me to this point.
So your son, Owen, who I've had the delight of speaking with, and he's great. So congratulations on raising such a terrific kid. You had your son, Owen, and then, and you worked and got through college and started working, and you worked in Indianapolis, right? But you were in journalism prior to. I was
a reporter. Actually, my first job, I was a reporter for the LaPorte Herald-Argus. And I did a TV show for Purdue. And what else did I do? Anyhow, Owen and I ended up moving to the United Kingdom for a couple years as a Rotary ambassadorial scholar. Came back, went to work in Indianapolis for the state. So I started working at the Indiana Department of Commerce. And I worked on Governor Frank O'Bannon's staff and spent much of my career at the global headquarters of Kiwanis International, which is a service club that does great things for people all over the world that happens to be headquartered here in Indiana. And I had just helped to launch a project to eliminate maternal and neonatal tetanus in the world. We all get tetanus shots, so we're protected, but in a lot of places where it's extremely difficult for women to give birth, that perfectly healthy newborn infant can be fated to one of the most awful and painful deaths imaginable, just because when that cord gets cut by a dirty piece of metal or bamboo, this is quite a downer too, that they get tetanus like you would if you stepped on a rusty nail and you weren't protected. And so I realized we had so many of these same issues facing Hoosiers and women here that it led me to run for office. And that's when I joined the General Assembly as an elected official and got to work on changing public policy for the greater good.
That's awesome. See, I love your story. That's why I wanted you to tell it. It's so
I don't think people polio's making a comeback. Like, this is like a good thing. I just don't think people understand. Like, I wouldn't have thought tetanus, but yes, all over the world, these things that have been eradicated here, and then we're being so flippant about vaccines, and it's just bizarre because you have people all over the world dying from things that we stopped 30, 40 years ago.
Janice, you're so right about that. And it's actually Rotary took on the challenge of polio, and that was a vaccination issue as well. And so you see people not getting their vaccines, and that's why we've got that issue again. You see it in New York City. They're seeing it pop up in the sewer system. Tetanus spore will always live in the ground, but we outthought it. We beat it. We've got a vaccine, and we're safe from it, but not everyone is. And that's why public policy is so important, because it has deep and significant impact on everyone's daily lives, sometimes even your survival. And it's not to be taken for granted.
Tell us a little bit about what your experiences were as a woman in the Indiana State House.
Well, it was really challenging. Women were and are still in the minority, it's a pretty homogenous group in the state house. Most people are white men of a certain age and a certain economic and educational background. And from that, I think you get a lot of that homogenous background, you get a lot of the same results. And I think we'll have healthy and effective government when government really reflects our communities. And women are just slightly more than half the population. So I'm convinced we need more women in positional power, calling the shots, making the decisions, proposing legislation, getting bills over the finish line, because we see it, we live it. We're the ones that know how much, a gallon of milk costs, and why the tax on diapers or feminine hygiene products, hundreds of dollars a year, like really hits you in the pocketbook when you have to eke out your tampons or maxi pads or diapers, and you're trying to stretch that to your next paycheck. No one should have to do that. And now we're charging sales tax on those items for families and women and girls. And, with a different perspective and with voices that have lived it, that's a powerful thing. And I think those are the kinds of changes we need to see happen.
Yeah. When you came on our first episode, and you told us about how incarcerated women had to pay for their own feminine hygiene products, I was blown away. Never even considered that. Didn't even think about that. I recently heard an NPR story on what inmates had to purchase for themselves. And they highlighted the undue burden on women to do that as well. So it was interesting hearing that repeated. But of all the legislation that you worked on in the state of Indiana, what's something that you were proudest of?
Well, one thing that's close to my heart is a bill I got passed that, what it was like when we were growing up, what a high school scene was like in the 80s, and it was a little wild. And, I certainly experienced some difficult times and saw that happen to some friends. I've talked about that in my book, actually, that it inspired me from a young age that when teens are drinking away from adult supervision at parties, a lot of times bad things happen. People get hurt, people get in fights, people get sexually assaulted, and no one wants to report it because they don't want to get their friends in trouble. Well, we were drinking. I can't get my best friend in trouble or these kids because of what happened to me. So I collaborated with a Republican senator, Jim Merritt, on the Indiana Lifeline law, and it indemnified minors from criminal offenses if somebody got hurt physically, say fell down a set of stairs or something, and they called an ambulance to help the kid out. It indemnified them from criminal charges, but working together, we expanded the law to say if there's a sexual assault, that everyone at that drinking event, that party, will be indemnified from criminal charges for drinking if that assault gets reported. No matter what happens, even if no one gets charged and nothing happens, if you report it, everyone's protected. And that was just to encourage people to report these assaults because they're teenagers, they're drinking, they're outside of parental supervision, and these things happen. And they happen at high rates. 1 in 6 girls and an untold number of boys, because we're not tracking that data, have been sexually assaulted by the time they leave high school. Often it's by someone they know, and often it's by a peer. So getting something done in that regard and honoring the situation of a dear, dear friend of mine that I learned about, the summer between 8th grade and freshman year was really important to me.
Wow. And honestly, that's something that I wouldn't have thought of, which is why I'm so glad that people who are making laws. Think about when they
well,
get
that's why it's important to have women too, because like you've lived through 1,000 things, Colleen. And I think, you know, if one day you're in the state house, and I hope you are, you'll remember that, and you'll have those, oh, hey, that shouldn't be moment. And it might be in another bill that's getting passed and you hadn't even considered the issue, but you have the practical experience of why it's not a good idea or what the unintended consequences might be. And you'd be that voice on the spot to get to the microphone to say, hey, I can support this bill, but we got to amend this piece out because this doesn't make sense. Or, you know, whatever that happens to be. And a lot of times you're making bad bills better too. So you're just on the spot when something's happening, and you can inform the process in a way to make the practical outcomes for people much more positive.
This is why you need that diversity from all different parts of the states, from different backgrounds.
Yeah.
Us having just different familial experiences, different family structures, different, you know, I mean, you really need that, because it seems like right now there's just, obviously, let's not go down. Colleen and I'll get sad again. Well, I'll get sad again, but it just seems like a small group of people are making rules for everybody, and mostly male, and they're making rules for women. I can't wrap my head around it. I don't know where they're getting their information from. And it's bizarre to me. I don't know how this is happening in 2022 in this country. I can't.
Even when they have good intentions, they just don't have the experience to make well-informed public policy all the time, because, hey, it never happened here, it never happened to me. Everyone I knew has this common background of privilege and safety, and that's just not everyone's lived experience.
Yeah, it's a lack of imagination and a lack of perspective taking, if I may diagnose the communication problem there.
And everyone's biased, right? Everyone has their inherent biases, and you know, like you said, it didn't happen to me. And even if it's not, you know, malintent, it's still, you know, because they're talking to people that agree with you, right? Usually. So the women in my life, they agree with me. So you would, you know, portray that.
Yeah. I mean, think about that woman who had to get to daycare to pick up her kid by 6 p.m. or pay $10 every minute she's overtime. Like, you know, that's a difficult thing, and helping people be productive workers without, you know, these kinds of fraught situations. Or just, I remember, you know, I collaborated with Ed Clear, a Republican legislator, to create a program for work study students. And that's because I had a work study experience where it was costing me more to pay an hour of daycare than it was to earn my hour of work. And I needed that job because I was writing press releases and it was like meaningful and resume building. So I didn't want to quit. So I asked for a raise. And to be perfectly honest, my woman boss offered me $0.05 an hour. And I thought, how many hours do I have to work just to make 1 hour of daycare? Like, I can't count that high. So, you know, that meaningful work experience for college students, non-traditional students, you know, near and dear to my heart. But how many experiences haven't I had? How many have you guys had? Like, sometimes it's just from being in the wrong place at the wrong time, but it opens an insight, or it makes you empathetic in a way that needs to be reflected for everybody when we are executing good public policy.
So let me attach something onto that. So how many women were in the state house when you were there? And has that increased or decreased since the time you were there? Do you have any knowledge of that?
It's slightly increased, like just by 1 or 2 people, but about 20% of the state house was comprised of women when I was there. It's slightly over that, but that's actually a global average. About 1 in 5 members of a parliament, a general assembly, a Congress, a city council, etc., around the world in countries where women are allowed to run for office, we're not really exceeding that 20% mark yet. Some of the Scandinavian countries are doing a little bit better, but for the most part, we're right at 20%.
Well, this ties right into your book with, my next question was like, how do we do it? Like, how do we change those numbers? And was that the inspiration behind why not you? Like, because I think a lot of women are like, I would do that, but then I already like during this conversation, I'm like, I just see barriers to entry that we just can't even like the dream's there. Like, I know so many smart, intelligent, hardworking, that would be amazing people to get into office. But I mean, I'm just like, nope. I see the no's way before the yeses.
Very, very common. I think it's starting to change, but you're right. And we tend to wait to be perfect before we make a move, and there's no such thing as perfection. And actually that's where we get our strength, I believe, is from being imperfect. But we want the perfect time, we want the perfect answer. What's your position on air quality? And people freak out and think like, well, God, I don't know, I'm not a chemist, I don't know, like parts per million, I don't know. But what we've got to realize is we can pivot, and it's okay. And you can get back to people with an answer, and you don't have to have everything fully baked and ready to go. You need to be a good person. You need to have a good mind, a good heart, and you need to be in it for the right reasons. And you need to say yes when the opportunity strikes.
So let's talk about your book. Okay. So I love the title. I love the idea. I love everything about it. So tell me how you got started writing this and who it's for.
It's geared toward a slightly younger audience, I would say, but it's for everybody, and it's an easy read, but I'm talking right to you. And I wrote it after I ran for Congress and lost by just a little bit. And living through January 6th and all the angst, and the person I ran against got to Washington and took a couple votes that made me want to set my hair on fire. She voted against the Violence Against Women Act, and she voted against the Equality Act. And you probably hear the passion of my voice and how I feel about reflecting everyone in government and elected office. And where I find hope is in people who haven't imagined that they can be part of elected leadership, but really should be. And I just want to get in your head and tell you all the reasons why it's a good idea and why it's important that you're connected to your why. You might have a certain cause. You might be concerned about gun violence or women's health care, or you name the issue. And that's what carries you to the point of making a decision. And what's going to make you a great office holder and a great candidate is that, like, the things that happen to you once you say yes and you realize you're working on behalf of the people, whether it's as a candidate on your way trying to get there, or once you get there and you're that elected office holder. And in the book, I highlight some people like Beth White, who was the Marion County, Indiana clerk. And she ran for office because she's passionate about fair elections, and she's passionate about helping people access the ballot. But what happened? That sliver of time opened where the county clerks could, for the first time ever in history, marry people of the same gender in Indiana. And she was the only county clerk that said, yeah, I'm going to do it. And she tried to encourage all of them, but she stepped up, first person in the state of Indiana, through her positional power, because of her why, stood up and married people.
So you highlight other women in your book as well who've been able to make changes.
Women, men, I highlight a lot of people. just I try to make sure that everyone's in my trajectory. So you'll hear about people. I think of a young man I talk about who is a quadriplegic, making a huge difference. I talk about a young man who came to this country after being a camel herder by the age of 5 in Africa, lost both of his parents, raised in a refugee camp, and all that he's done since he came to this country. But, finding and seizing your power in your voice and taking your servant leadership values and applying them to positional leadership when you have that power to make change. And that's what I think is so important.
But what if you don't have power per se? Because I really like what you said earlier about women.
Yeah.
Specifically, I see that a lot. And I know the saying like fake it till you make it kind of came out from that, from stop striving for perfection. Just get out there, get your hands wet, get your feet dirty, whatever the saying is, feet wet, hands dirty. But I feel like lately a lot of women just feel powerless. So now you have almost like a people disengaging, right, from the process. I mean, how do we get back in the ring, I guess? I mean, because I think what you're saying is like, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be this whole setup. It could be like on a micro level. Like, is that what we do? Just maybe start small? Because I feel like the problems to me seem so overwhelming.
They are. And, of course we need people to turn up and vote and all of that. And if you are a cause-driven person, there's so many not-for-profit boards you can serve on and jump in and help and get your hands dirty, like you said. But I think too, people have to be ready to say yes. And it's a hard thing to run for office. And it's hard to be suddenly a public person who's open to criticism and haters and unpleasant people on social media. There are 2 ways, I think, to get to positional elected power, running for office. And one is you plan for it and you prepare and you decide, like, I'm going to run for city council. I'm going to run for that school board. And sometimes you might even have to move into a district. You'll have to put yourself out there and, go to community events and shake hands and get really comfortable with uncomfortable situations and conversations, because you're putting it out there. It's you. But the other way is you're just in the right place at the right time.
All right. And one step that we also need to mention is that one of the first things you can do if you're considering this is buy the book, Why Not You? A Leadership Guide for Change Makers of Tomorrow. Where can people find your book, Christy?
You can get it at any online bookstore you wish, including bookseller.org, amazon.com, just whatever's easy for you. Barnes and Noble, it's all there. Just Google Why Not You and Christina Hale, and you should be able to find it.
And we'll have that information in our description of the episode. And we have questions that we ask everybody at the end of our podcast. 2 questions. The very first one is, tell us, what is one of your favorite things about the state of Indiana?
Oh, first thing that came to mind, corn and tomatoes. But that might be because I'm a little hungry.
Yeah, and it's August.
It's August, yeah.
Good time.
And I've been in DC and I've been wanting corn and tomatoes really badly. So
I feel bad that I'm keeping you away from corn and tomatoes right now. All right. And then if you could change one thing about Indiana, what would it be?
Oh, everything that we've been talking about. I want to see our elected leaders reflect the community, and that's just got to happen. For us to have a state that works for everybody. So if you're out there, the universe is tapping you on the shoulder, think about it. Why not you?
I love it. I can't think of a better way to end this episode. Christy, I am once again very grateful for your time. And thank you so much for sharing your story, telling us more stories about inspiring people in Indiana who are doing their best to make changes, and giving us some guidelines for how we can get started, or at least feel empowered to get started. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, thank you both. I really appreciate it.
Such a treat.
Thanks.
Defending Indiana, featuring Colleen Brennan and Janice Rodriguez, is produced by Colleen Brennan and Janice Rodriguez. Theme music and sound editing by Michael Miltenberger. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard today, you can subscribe to Defending Indiana wherever you find your favorite podcasts.